This session is being sponsored by the Sonoma County Hospitality Association. I'm the president of the Hospitality Association, and we're a group that represents the broad interest of hospitality and tourism with visitor-facing businesses. So that's from hotels to restaurants, vacation rentals, attractions, transportation companies, and the like. And one of our mission is really focusing on advocacy and promoting the benefits of hospitality and tourism, educational seminars and information sessions like this for our members that helps keep them informed on key topics of interest, as well as partnerships with community organizations and many organizations throughout Sonoma County. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tennis to give us a brief update on what's transpired, Tennis, since the August Board of Supervisors meeting. Most people on the call, may have heard bits and pieces, but it's been almost six months now. So it's a great time to give people an update of where things are today, what's transpired, as also where we're going with this for the rest of the years, particularly the next 6 months.
Great. Thank you, Liza. So good afternoon, everybody. So nice to be out of the Emergency Operations Center and back in civilian practice. I will have to be going back in several minutes. We're still going through damage assessment with Cal OES and federal officials who will be rolling into town Monday. But I just wanted to say vacation rentals and hospitality are obviously a key part of our economy, part of our culture here. They're part of the joy of living and working in Sonoma is getting to enjoy the different aspects of hospitality on those few days off that we all get. So thank you for that as a patron. And as someone who has watched vacation rentals evolve from a time when, remember, open debates and verbal fights at the Board of Supervisors as a very controversial item to where we are now with an accepted and established framework and really focusing on locations where they work and maybe there's a challenge and some of the performance standards. So I think we've gotten to a much better place. Where we are now is where we've been is at the Planning Commission, where Gary Helfrich is the project manager. He's with us here this afternoon, and also carrying out implementation of the program is Tara Harrington, who you see on screen, who's our code enforcement division manager. And I'm sure there's other people I'm not exactly seeing from county staff, but I'm sure they'll pop up if they're with us. We also have Planning Commission going on today. So one of the things I wanted to say was thank you so much to your organization for reaching out to us during the flood, because I know there's been certain messages that were conveyed about warning versus order as it pertains to evacuations. And rather than making a presumption, the organization reached out to us directly in the Emergency Operations Center, which I so appreciate. And the message today is to follow today's law. And today's law is when the sheriff and our emergency management department heads say, this is a warning, you need to heed it. We'd advise you to be ready to leave. And when an order happens, go. I think it's part of our culture now. Personally, I'd not like to complicate that message anymore. And whatever comes out of the Planning Commission will then go to the board. And once the board adopts new law, then the message might be a little different. But between now and then, myself, Sheriff Ingram, and Chris Godley from Emergency Management will be working to clarify and comment on whatever comes out of the planning commission.
Tennis, do you mind giving people a timeline of when, when the next, when the planning commission will review things like the draft of the vacation rental business license program, and when the supervisor, what's the timeline over the next few months? And
sure, I get to do that the easy way. And I do that by introducing my colleague and old friend, Gary Helfrich, who's the project manager, and he will be happy to provide all those details.
Okay, well, thank you, Tennis.
Thank
We
you all.
appreciate your time today. And I know it's been a tough few weeks for everyone in the county dealing with these storms.
Yeah, for all of us. Take care.
So I'm Gary Helfrich. I'm the project manager for the vacation rental program update, and did want to, there's a lot of moving parts to this program, and this is, I think, what causes confusion. It confuses us. County council and I confuse each other on this project. One aspect of it is the license, which is something I think we're going to get a lot of questions about. And the license ordinance is different than the other parts of the ordinance in that it's in the administrative code. So rather than going through the planning commission, that goes directly to the board. On August 2nd of last year, we had a board hearing for a package of ordinance changes that included amending the zoning code, amending the coastal zoning code, amending the local coastal plan, and amending the administrative code. Some of those items got carried forward and some were adopted. What were adopted were the changes in the zoning codes, being both the inland code and the coastal code. What was carried forward is the amendment to the local coastal plan and the vacation rental license ordinance. Those two items will be going in early spring, and we'll be publishing the draft of the license ordinance shortly. That's gone through final review with county council and a few more pieces of bookkeeping, and we will get that one out on the street. And it's important for us to get that out early because the Coastal Commission has a much longer review period than the county does. So we need at least, that has to be circulated for at least 6 weeks before we set the meeting. So that said, the license ordinance was planned to be adopted at the August 2nd meeting, and was not because the board wanted 4 fairly substantial changes made, and council felt that it has to go back for another first reading. And those changes were removing the requirement that certified property managers live within 30 miles of the vacation rental, that instead they said, we're just going to base it on performance. If they solve the problem, they solve the problem. If they don't, well, then we're going to have to take enforcement action. But that standard did not seem to result in better performance or worse performance. We're going to increase. So the other things are changing the administrative fines that can be levied for a license violation. And this is part of why we've separated the program into 2 parts. There's a zoning permit, which everyone is familiar with. That's your TVR permit, or for the older operators, it's actually a zoning, it's a ZPE, it's a zoning permit. Going forward, that is, the zoning permit will certify that the property is appropriate for vacation rental of a certain size, and that's it. It doesn't have any performance standards in it. Then you get a license to operate the vacation rental. And that also takes care of one issue of somebody may not want to operate every year. So you can let your license lapse and then reapply in the future. As long as you don't sell the property, you'll still have your zoning permit. And the other thing with regard to enforcement is we have a lot of progressive measures. Right now, it's either we can revoke it or do nothing. And that's the only 2 tools in our toolbox. which has made it tough for kind of doing course corrections on operators that just need a little nudge to do the right thing. So a new thing there is that we can levy fines. They can be substantial. They can be up to $5,000. So that's one of the changes. We can revoke the license or the certification for up to 5 years. That's a change that the board made. The draft was up to 2 years. And the final thing, which is kind of a minor part of the performance standards, is add a lighting standard to address additional nighttime lighting, basically saying you really can't install additional nighttime lighting. And there's an objective standard in there that can be measured. So if you exceed that, then you've got to shield your lights, take the lights down. Not a huge deal there. So this though is the most important message I think I can transmit is much of this is not retroactive. If you currently hold a valid permit and you've been paying your transient occupancy tax, you can continue to operate at the same capacity and you can own as many vacation rentals as you want to. There's not going to be a revocation of existing entitlements. What is going to change is the way you operate them is going to change. But people have worried that we're reducing things like the maximum capacity. If you've got a permit, though, right now that says you can have 18 people during the day, you can have 18 people during the day, and your license will reflect your current entitlement. The same is also true of the board did prohibit vacation rentals in the low density residential, the R1 zoning district, and that's something I'm going to talk a little bit more about in just a second. But if you've got a vacation rental in that area, you're not going to lose your vacation rental. That you can operate it until you sell the property. So I just wanted to be, I'll be like a stuck record on that, is we're not taking anything away from existing operators. So the new standards are you get 12 guests, period. No exceptions for daytime or holiday use. And it's based on the actual number of bedrooms in your home. This, once again, is new vacation rentals only. Vacation rentals are still prohibited in accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. We've clarified what a parking space is, and we've taken that from the design standards in the zoning code. So it's a space at least 9 feet by 20 feet for an off-street parking space. If you're claiming on-street parking, you have to identify a space within 500 feet of your rental that meets the California Vehicle Code and Sonoma County parking regulations. Generally, the standard can be met, but for instance, if there's a big no parking zone around your home, you may not be able to meet that and you can't claim credit. Or if the road is so narrow that you can't get the vehicle more than 6 feet from the road center line, that's in the county parking regulations, then those don't count as off-street parking. So that's kind of a roundup on the changes there. Supervisor Hopkins asked us to consider bringing forward an idea that we had in 2016 that did not become part of the ordinance at that time, which is creating a resort area overlay district where vacation rentals have an identified nexus to the local. This is important to the local economy, and that these local vacation rentals are an essential part of the local economy. Guerneville is a perfect example of where that's the case. And we're still in development on that. We've had some floods and other things that have kind of slowed that down, but we're hoping to get a draft of that out probably in February, and would like to meet with your group. We're going to meet with the MAX, and then we'll go to the Planning Commission and then take it to the Board of Supervisors. But the idea there is it wouldn't be a complete exception. It would say here's what the local economy needs, and there would be a carrying capacity identified in the area, and we would say you can have this many, or the code would say you can, within this area there can be this many vacation rentals, regardless of whether or not it's in the R1 zone. The other thing is, once again, since these permits don't go away until you sell the property, the effect of the R1 ban is not going to be that immediate. It's going to happen slowly over time, and our experience in areas where we've been able to monitor the reduction that happens in things like the exclusion zones, the X zones, where they're just out and out prohibited, is since we put the X zone in 2016, we've only seen on the order of 5 to maybe in one area 10% reduction in vacation rentals. That they don't go away that quickly. I think people hold on to those properties. And once again, it's that entitlement runs with the land. It runs with the owner. It's until you sell it. Then let's see, there were some four specific questions that Liza sent me, and I just wanted to touch on those quickly. One was about payments, and somebody was having a problem paying. I mean, certainly if you're really having a problem, contact Christina at our who operates our vacation rental program. But you should be able to take care of that online. If you go to the vacation rental and hosted rental page and click on vacation rental fees, you'll get a page that comes up, and you can review your current invoice. You can pay through a number of methods. It also gives you an address you can mail a check to. I think in some instances, because I've done a few spot checks on this, if you're already current, it's not going to generate an invoice. So it may be that somebody's already paid up, and we appreciate that, which is why they can't find an invoice. But yeah, if you have any real problems making payments, we would love to help you make payments. That's something that we like. Let's see. The next one was I covered the inclusion zone already, and the resort overlay. So that was actually two of the questions. And the last one is about the evacuation orders, evacuation warnings. And this really is going, once the license program is in place, this is going to be incorporated into your mandatory evacuation plan that you're going to give to your guests. And it really needs to be written clearly enough that your guest understands the difference between an order and a warning. They know what evacuation zone they're in. They know how to listen on the emergency radio, which we're also requiring all vacation rentals to keep an emergency radio so that people can get the notices. And we are requiring that a landline be in all vacation rentals, because we have had problems of rentals in more remote parts of the county where people would just assume that they had cell service and they don't, and they have no way to be contacted at the rental because the people have cut the cord. So that, I think that kind of rounds up my overview. I don't want to just keep talking forever. I'd rather answer your questions.
Well, Gary, thank you very much for that. I do see a few questions here related to some of the comments you've made. And one of them is the related to the quiet hours. And it's not clear to people if the change from quiet hours starting at 9 p.m., does that apply to, well, under the business license program, will that apply to both current rentals and new rentals, or just to new rentals? Hello? Can you hear me?
Oh, I can
Yeah,
hear
sorry.
you fine, but I keep getting the host has to unmute me. So
Oh, good. Okay,
when I
great.
press
Sorry.
my unmute, nothing
Okay.
occurs. Things that involve life safety and nuisance are going to be part of holding your license. So once the license program rolls out, the quiet hours will start an hour earlier
For all current vacation
for
rentals and
for
new
everybody
rentals.
holding a license.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And I know that the question someone asked, the question about payments, somebody asked if it was related to TOT. That question has actually come up on the annual monitoring fee. So as you know, vacation rental owners are required to pay an annual monitoring fee. Can you hear me? Nate?
Unmute
There,
yourself,
no,
Gary.
no, I was trying to unmute myself, but I needed the permission thing. Okay, yes, and I did hear everything. So that's
So I was just clarifying that the question about the payments was related to the monitoring fees, which have to be paid annually. But please send Christina or the vacation rental desk at Permit Sonoma a message if you are having trouble paying that fee.
and to clarify, that fee is going away with the license. That will become the license fee.
Mhm.
So it'll be the same amount, but that will be your license renewal fee.
Okay. And then I'm not seeing, I'm gonna have to scroll up to get to some of these other questions. Gary, in terms of the draft of the business license, will there be any specific, prior to it going to the planning commission, will this vacation rental people on this call and others who are interested, will there be some community outreach to get their input? Or is that going to only happen at the planning commission?
I wanted to clarify, it doesn't go to the planning commission.
Oh, it doesn't. Okay.
It goes, the board has already heard the license and they made some corrections during the hearing. So we've got to bring it back to them with those corrections. But certainly any comments or suggestions that people want to make, we will include those in the board packet so the board can consider that input. In fact, that's part of the reason that they made those changes, was based on input. In fact, the one about distance from the rental was, some of your members made that suggestion and the board took it to heart.
So the just again to clarify that you expect the license text, what month do you think it'll go before the BOS?
Let me get back to you on that, just because we set a bunch of items yesterday and it got kind of complicated juggling things on various agendas, but it is going to be early spring. Okay. It's not going to be that long.
So I think it would be great.
And in fact, sorry to interrupt, we have to get it done before the moratorium expires. We need to get everything buttoned down before the end of the moratorium.
Okay.
Because it'll just be chaos if we don't.
Right, exactly. And then would you clarify, when the business license program is implemented, is it going to be, there was talk about it being a phased approach, so it might take up to 12 months for every vacation rental owner to get the license, or is that changed, the timing of that?
We have to allow a reasonable amount of time for people to get the licenses. What we came up with is a much simpler, because what we're worried about is everybody applies at the same time. We get all over 1,000 applications at once, and then in a year we're going to get this tsunami of license renewals coming in at the same time. And the plan right now is that we would give you a renewal month based on just the number. Everything will be numbered sequentially. First permit in is first license in is license 1, next is license 2, et cetera, et cetera. And we assign a month to each number. So let's say you come in, you're number 5, or you're some multiple of, not a multiple of 5, because it sequences in 12s. This is, the explanation is more complicated than the actual execution here, but you may end up getting a license that's issued that's good for 18 months on your initial license. And the point of that is to stagger things. So we will issue the initial license for longer than the annual fee longer than the annual life of the license normally, to make sure that everybody doesn't come in at the same time to renew them in the next year. So there'll be a window that and we're still looking at how we're going to issue these licenses in the coastal zone, because there's no permits associated with any of those vacation rentals, but there has to be a valid TOT certificate. So this is actually just a heads up, is we're going to use that TOT list to contact the people who need to get a license. So if you're not on that list, you should be paying your TOT. That goes without saying. That's the subtle hint there, is make sure you're current on your TOT, and then you'll be looped into the license program.
Could you give an update on the burn zones? I mean, I know that that was lifted, but in effect, the burn zones are still part of the moratorium. So what is the expectation on when owners seeking new vacation rental permits and the burn zones might apply? And related to that is, I thought, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think a number of us thought that the supervisors were also asking to look at density limits and caps in other areas besides Russian River. If you could address those two issues, that'd be
okay.
fantastic.
Two separate things. On 13 December, the board repealed the vacation rental restrictions on all the burn zones. So there are no longer restrictions in the burn zones for vacation rentals. They renewed those ordinances, but took out the restriction. But there's a county-wide moratorium. So it's in some ways it's irrelevant that got lifted, because everybody is still under the same county-wide moratorium. There's no special burden though that would be on owners that are inside the burn zone anymore. Everybody's under the same county-wide moratorium.
So when the county-wide moratorium is lifted, then those owners will be able to apply for. They also be subject to caps, say in the Glenelg and Kenwood area, or certain areas that are outside of Russian River.
Okay, they won't be subject to any unusual regulations that don't affect everybody else. So just want to be clear on that. The thing I didn't touch on yet is that the X zone, which is the exclusion zone, now has two other tools in the toolbox, which is to impose either a 5% or 10% cap within a specific geographic area where vacation rentals are found to be over concentrated. This is going to be a long continuous process, because that involves rezoning property. So we have to do outreach to the max. We're going to have to go to the planning commission, and we have to go to the board for each area. And it's done in a community context too. So there's not going to be a wholesale rezoning. The point is the tool is just there all the time. And whether, hang on just a second. Okay. I've got to kill that. Whether or not an area has good, that went away. It isn't specific for the Russian River, specific for burn zones. We're going to have to make findings that it's appropriate. There has to be community support for it. And in some areas, in fact, we're going to be meeting with the Fitch Mountain folks later today. We also can consider changing an exclusion zone to a cap, so that the idea is, say that there's a carrying capacity for this community of a certain number of vacation rentals. So rather than excluding them completely, we can say that 10% of the homes or 5% of the homes could potentially be used as vacation rentals.
Okay, great. So I know there are some hands raised. I'd like to move through a few more of the questions that have been submitted on chat. And then Nate I'll be asking you to call on the people with their hands raised. So here's an important question. I think this comes from, this is from the Russian River area. It says that, that I guess there are some areas of the county that AT&T no longer operates in. And so the question is, how can this landline requirement, may not be, owners may not be able to get a landline in some areas of the county.
The ordinance is pretty clear that you can use VoIP. So if you've got internet, you can meet that requirement. If you don't have any internet service and you don't have any cell service and you don't have a landline, that's potentially just a public safety issue at that point. But most people have internet service.
Although a lot of, in some of the fires, as you know, the internet service has gone down, especially in some of the rural areas where there's these small providers, microwave providers. I mean, it's just something I think we're all going to have to take a look at and see. The internet is going to be down someplace in the county.
It is, but the fact of the matter is we have big blank areas that have no cell coverage. Okay. And people, the point the board made is people must have a way to communicate in the event of an emergency.
Yeah, I think owners are fully on board with that. You would just have to watch this AT&T issue. This new information. I had no idea that AT&T didn't offer service. And
well, for instance, we can't get a landline anymore in Camp Meeker where I live, but I can get broadband from Comcast. So, right. And I'm talking on the phone right now, and it's working great.
So one of the another question, and this is, I think, potentially a valid point from a liability issue, is that I'm assuming that under this lighting restriction, that lights that are safety in terms of lighting, trip hazards and pathways will be allowed.
They will, and the thing to understand about this standard is it's taken directly from our residential design guidelines. So the point is we don't want people lighting their property up like a gas station canopy. There's lighting necessary for safety, and then there is lighting that trespasses into neighboring properties to a point where it's annoying. But if literally we cut and paste that standard from the standard that we put on every design review approval for every home in the county that has to go through design review. So it's not an unusual set of standards. In fact, it doesn't limit things like floodlights. It just says you can't have them pointed up at the sky.
Okay, well, thanks for that clarification. Would you also clarify that the lighting landline emergency radio, that would apply to all existing vacation rentals and new rentals under the business license, or would it just apply to new rentals? It'll
apply to everybody. That's a life safety issue.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. There are some questions about the cap area analysis in the cap area of Guerneville, the attrition. This person, Alex, says the attrition was 10% annually. If there's a cap versus a complete ban matters for attrition. I'm not sure, Alex, if you want it, if that's a comment or a question. Let's see. Since the ordinance for a license has not been passed yet, does that mean there are no performance standards except where they're listed on the zoning permit? So right now, the proposed business license standards are not in effect. Is that correct?
That is correct, but the performance standards that are in your zoning permit are very much in effect.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What's the expiration date of the moratorium again? I think there's some confusion about whether it's May or June.
It's May 9th, 2023.
Okay. there's a lot of discussion about the landline issue, and I think I would encourage PRMD, we can get you, I hope some of these questions and comments that may just require a little more explanation to owners in terms of exactly how to address it in certain areas of the county. Yes,
the point that I'd like to make to that is we would love to look at any solutions that people can offer us.
So one is, and Ward Bowman said, and again, Starlink. So
that's fine. That would meet, because that's VoIP, that's voice over internet.
So I know that a number, I do know some people over in Russian River, that area, that have installed Starlink, and they've been incredibly pleased. So that's something definitely worth looking into.
Well, just when that's already allowed in the current draft. So that's not something we would have to change.
Okay. So the lighting requirement, someone says the lighting requirement is for all homes, not for just for short-term rentals. Yes, so there are standards on new projects that go before Permit Sonoma, and all of those they're the same standards for those projects as for vacation rentals.
Right. That's a standard for any home that would be subject to design review, which is quite a few areas in the county.
Okay. Could Nate, are there people that have raised their hand? We'll go to some of the people who raised their hands for their questions now, and then come back to some of these comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Hand raisers, thank you for your patience here. For those of you that do want to raise your hand but are not quite sure how, on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see a button that says reactions, and under reactions, there is an opportunity to raise your hand. But first hand I saw raised was David. So David, you may go ahead and unmute and you can ask your question.
Hi, Gary. Nice to see you again. And thank you for all your hard work on the ordinance and all your diligence. I just had two questions that are relevant to the evacuation. One was just a recent evacuation warning that we had, and our power was out for an entire day. Luckily, I did not have a guest at the time, but the reality is that even if you have a landline that's wired, or you have a VoIP line, power's out and none of those lines work, no matter what. So there's no way, realistically, for the property manager, unless they go around to each and evacuated property, to notify the guests that they need to leave. And in many cases in the forest, there's no way to get to the road because it's dangerous. It's rain, it's crazy. So I think we need to kind of come up with a way to kind of ameliorate that, or at least let guests know before they travel to be aware of Nixle. But even that won't work because cell service doesn't work in the forest. So I think there needs to be some kind of consideration for West County in that regard, especially in the forested areas that are in canyons. Secondarily, if there is an evacuation warning, oftentimes you need to kind of let your guests know who are coming but haven't arrived yet that it might not be safe to go. And I had to cancel a reservation, and then Airbnb penalized me because I canceled the reservation because the warnings weren't good enough. So my hope is that when the county does issue its warnings and it's in the ordinance, you'll notify Airbnb that they have to activate their extenuating circumstances policy, because that protects the hosts from receiving a mark on their record. And many of us don't have that many reservations. So one cancellation by a host will kick you out of the superhost program. And so I just want to make sure you guys are aware that if the ordinance says evacuation warning, no guests, it's typically not about the guests that are already there. It's about the ones that are about to arrive that really matter, because you don't want to let a guest in the county it's not safe. So I want you to make sure you understand that that's a real concern for the hosts. And those are the other only two requirements. But I just want to also thank you, Gary, for all your hard work on the ordinance. I know it's been a long slog.
So
Thank you.
it did occur to me that another potential forum like this could be inviting someone this area from Airbnb to answer questions from
Yeah,
Airbnb about a variety of issues. I think you brought this to my attention before, and it's an issue that I think we need to get clarity from Airbnb, and they need to understand the situation in our county with regards to fires and floods. Let's see, Nate, do we have another question?
We sure do. Next hand raised I saw was, I think it's Jillian. I'm going to go ahead and let you unmute there.
Thank you. I'll try and be quick. I have lots of questions, but I'd like to get a copy of the ordinance. I just heard Gary's overview and I was notified of this meeting, but I don't have a copy. I'd love to look at it. I'm an Airbnb rental owner in Guerneville. I also live in Sonoma County. I've worked really hard as a single mom, working 3 jobs to buy that Airbnb back in 2008. I'm legally permitted, but I consider myself a very small business owner. So a lot of the things that you're talking about in this ordinance are raising all of my costs. And it's very frustrating. Things like a landline phone that you might think might be helpful, which the first speaker proved to us that it's really not. In my case, it's the same. You're not going to get through on an internet phone or a landline when the power's out. That's raising a cost for me. I did look into that. It's $55 a month for me to provide a landline that will not work when the power's out. So if you think about these, the TOT taxes, I paid the original license fee back, in the day, and now we're now paying monitoring fees. So that's an additional fee. There's now going to be more TOT reporting required. Now this hospitality committee is proposing another 2% fee on top of it's basically killing my small business. I may make $30,000 or $40,000 a year, but all of these fees, a yearly business license required fee, all of these things are just adding up and adding up. And while I could understand if I had 5 rentals and I was making like a really livable wage on this property, that might be appropriate. I do not think that all these requirements are going to be helpful for us small owners that have just one. So I would just encourage the county to think about that. Again, it's good to hear that the lighting requirements are not more restrictive than the normal lighting standards in the county code. So I'm not sure why it has to be in this ordinance, but it's already in the county zoning code. It applies to all homes. And I think the same thing for noise. It seems super unfair that you're going to restrict the house next to me is residential, so they can be loud till 10 p.m., but my vacation rental has to be quiet at 9. If the county code is the county code in that residential area, all quiet should stop at the same time. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm supportive of the overlay zone that Ms. Hopkins is proposing if it loosens up our restrictions. Not going to be supportive if it adds more restrictions. It makes it harder for us to rent. Again, I've been doing this since 2008. I've not had one complaint. So I am a responsible property owner. And so I think the fines and that complaint process, if you tighten up that really good, you're going to get good vacation managers like myself. And I think that that's the way you should do it. Instead of restricting us that are doing a good job, you should be allowing us a little bit more flexibility. And then just like I said, I would love to get a copy of that proposed ordinance and then understand what date it's going before the board so that I can bring my concerns there. And again, if we're going to be looking at hospitality fees, I suggest you do keep a threshold because I am paying enough in this county. I'm barely surviving. And I really do not think that when I'm making $30,000 a year, I should pay 2%. If I made $150 a year, by all means, I could benefit from some of those opportunities. So just wanted to let you know my opinions and try and get access to that ordinance and the dates it's going to be going before the board. Thank you.
So Gary, related to this, there have been some comments just about, reaching out beyond just the max, but I think that my sense is in talking to people and seeing some of these comments that I think the owner vacation rental community, it just, many people feel that the process hasn't been as inclusive as possible, and they're still looking for an opportunity to provide input and, and feedback and comments on this.
Well, we're doing that right now, and we're happy to do another session with your group. It seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but this may be one of the more effective organizations to connect with the owners.
Yeah, I mean, this is a loose group of, it's, sort of people that have been talking and the Sonoma County Hospitality taking a lead to set it up. But I think we certainly could set up additional sessions. And I would also encourage people on the call to, continue to voice your opinions, concerns to your individual, supervisor. It's, having a robust dialogue about all of this stuff is always incredibly important. Nate, do we have any more hands raised? It looks like there are several people. Josette?
Yeah, we've got 2 more hands raised. Josette, you can now go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, yes, thank you very much for having this meeting. This is great. I want to echo what Jillian said. I have a hard time understanding this 9 o'clock versus 10 o'clock because I think it should be the same for all residents. Everyone should be abiding by the same rules. And it's, we can tell our guests that, but it's, I believe, unfair to them to treat them that way. So I don't know that it's negotiable or it's going to change because I understand the Board of Supervisors was very strongly in favor of this. As I said, we'll have to live with it, but it just seems rather unfair to me. And we're not really talking about the 2% assessment proposed, but I think that the county as a whole should recognize us as valuable small business owners. Sometimes I feel like the rhetoric on social media and what comes out of the county puts us in a position where you got our taxes, you got our TOT, and you want the assessment, but why not treat us the same as you treat restaurants and, other businesses? Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I one just clarification there, and this is going to sound like a horrible government bureaucrat, but do be aware that the assessor is a separately elected official, does not answer to the Board of Supervisors. So we have no control over your tax assessments, none whatsoever. So
that's not what I asked.
No, but I'm pointing out when you're talking about that 2% assessment.
No, I understand that. That's not what I asked about. I understand that would go to the tourism district and it would come directly from the guests. I understand that. And I understand that TOT has to be paid. What I'm saying is I wish that the dialogue that comes out of the county concerning us as small business owners would show appreciation for that. I understand that there's no control over that. So I hope I made myself clear.
Yeah, no, because just a couple of folks already have, I guess I was getting the impression that people felt that through this ordinance, we could give them some relief from those taxes. And so just wanted to clarify that's
okay. All right. Well,
that's not anything that we're able to do.
And, one of the, we all know that there is a certain anti-tourism, anti-vacation rental sentiment in the county. If you talk to the wineries and grape growers, they will voice the same concern that there's anti-winery sentiment. And a part of the mission of our Sonoma County Hospitality Association is to talk about the positive benefits of hospitality and tourism to the community, but it's an ongoing issue.
Right.
We live in an area that there are mixed feelings about tourism, and it's honestly a constant issue that those of us in hospitality and tourism need to continue to advocate for the positive impacts, which are many and numerous, not the least of which are the number of jobs and the financial contribution from property taxes, TOT taxes, and everything else. So one last question I forgot to ask to Tara. I'm sorry, am I saying your name correctly? It has to do with the 24/7 new complaint hotline. I think it was introduced a couple of months ago. Could you update the group on how's that hotline going? And what kind of complaints have you been getting? And do you have any feedback for owners who have been contacted by the hotline in terms of are there things they should be doing more of, less of, and in terms of responding to questions and complaints that have gone into the hotline? I don't know. Can you unmute, Nate? Can you unmute? Or is it Tyra?
Tira.
Tira, I'm so sorry, Tira.
yeah.
Can you
There you go.
unmute? Oh, there, you're unmuted. If you
There
could
I am.
address.
There I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and then we
Okay,
will,
very good.
after this, Lindsay, we're going to come to you for your last question.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, code enforcement does enforce the standards with vacation rental, and we also enforce those that are operating as a vacation rental without the benefit of a permit. So steadily, when since about 2016, we have averaged about 100 complaints per year until about 2018, where we really did a deep dive working with owners and property managers to educate them on ways they could reduce the number of complaints in the community. So we've spent a lot of time working with, like I said, managers and property owners and telling them, giving them suggestions of putting the rules right up front when people enter the property, make sure to have them on the listing so the residents know what the rules are. So that's really reduced the amount of complaints we got. In 2021, for an example, we got 66 complaints that year. Primarily, it had to do with the property manager not responding to complaints, and noise were the two top factors in that year. So it was quite a bit of reduction, probably a third of a reduction in the typical year. Also that year, we identified 109 properties that were operating as vacation rentals without the benefit of permit. In 2022, and we started the hotline about mid-year. It's been about 5 or 6 months now that we've been operating the hotline. Since the operation of the hotline, we've only gotten 24 calls in complaining about different factors. There was about 5 that were miscellaneous, wanting more information about the program. Again, noise and property manager not returning complainants' calls were the big factors in those complaints. We had 3 parking, 1 dog, 2 on advertising that perhaps they weren't advertising correctly, and 2 on trash cans. Also during that time, we've investigated 145 properties that were renting without the benefit of permit. So that's the stats on that. We're very happy with the hotline. We're getting good information from the callers into that hotline. It is a 24-hour service where they can call in, and then that service calls the property manager, notifies them of the complaint. And then both parties, the property manager reaches out to us as well and lets us know that they received a complaint. So far in talking, and I've been trying to monitor this very closely just to ensure that the hotline is working properly and doing the job that Gary and I have hoped to do. And I think it's working very well. So hopefully I answered your questions on that.
Thank you very much. Lindsay, and we have Carmen, and then we're probably going to have to wrap this up shortly. We're almost to the end of the hour, but hopefully we can go a couple of minutes over. Lindsay?
Perfect. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I have 2 questions. And so with the X overlay going away that you mentioned and being replaced with the density caps, because the recommendations of density caps haven't been presented to the board yet, are we assuming those are going to come up in early spring when you discuss the business license, or should we anticipate an extension being requested of the moratorium? And then my second question is, with the adoption of the business license, will permit forms be changing significantly, or will the zoning permit application remain the same and there will just be an addition of the business license application? Thank you.
I'm going to answer that in reverse order. Because the zoning permit is really going to be just a checklist. You know, either your property has the right zoning and qualifies or it doesn't. That we're hoping is just going to be an online thing. You check the boxes, it gets verified, you get your zoning permit. So we're hoping to make that very automated. And we're really going to do our best to improve the process too for applying for the license, because since you'll already have your zoning permit, we know the property has been vetted. So it's really a matter of just making sure that what you're applying for matches the zoning permit. So once again, I think the process is going to be easier rather than more complicated, even though you're applying for 2 entitlements. Going back to the X overlay, there's a lot of misunderstanding here. So there's 2 parts of this. There's the legislation and there's the implementation. So all that's happened so far is the laws have been created. So there's the legal framework. Nothing has been rezoned. Nothing has changed. And the change adds the ability to do a cap as well as do an exclusion. So there is no proposal to just throughout the entire county switch the X zones over to cap areas, or to just automatically put cap areas everywhere in the county. These are rezonings, and they get handled through the same fairly long and very public process that any rezoning goes through. So just to emphasize, what the board did was develop the tools in our zoning code to allow us to do this, but we've not begun that process.
And who initiates that? I mean, how would that actually happen?
Well, a couple of different ways. In the case of, once again, the case of Fitch Mountain, the community has been very active and very engaged, and also it's easy. One of the problems we run into is defining the boundaries of an unincorporated community. I mean, in many cases, people will argue whether a certain area, is Villa Grande separate from Monte Rio? Or are they the same thing? Where's the line between Rio Neto and Guerneville? Et cetera, et cetera. Fitch is good because it just sits on a peninsula and a bow in the Russian River, and it's geographically, everyone agrees on the boundaries. So that's the first thing we have to do is since we're going to impose a cap, it's a ratio of vacation rentals to single family dwellings. Well, to get to the number of single family dwellings, we got to know how many parcels we're looking at. So that's one challenge that we have. We have work that we've done in the lower Russian River that was part of an urgency ordinance in 2020 that took a pretty deep dive into looking at the various communities and how many vacation rentals existed in those areas. And since at least we've got a draft set of maps, we've got a starting point for the community. So what we would probably do is bring those back to the community and say, okay, first thing, do you even agree with these boundaries? And once we get agreement on where the boundaries are, then our next step would be, are these areas over-concentrated? We could do the analysis, because sometimes it turns out that people think there's a high concentration of vacation rentals, but the reality is either there's just a small pocket somewhere in their neighborhood, or it's 1 or 2 bad operators that make it seem like there's a lot of vacation rentals, but really the numbers don't bear out that there's a high concentration. I mean, the other side is we see areas with huge concentration that we never get complaints, and I'm thinking there of Sea Ranch. Sea Ranch is close to 50% vacation rentals, but that's a special case. I mean, that really shouldn't be used to compare anything else to, but the point is it varies between those 2 extremes within Sonoma County. It's a very context sensitive analysis. that we'll have to do.
But Gary, is Permit Sonoma, I always say PRMD, is Permit Sonoma going to be proposing density limits and caps, or is that going to come, or supervisors going to request that for their area, or are different community associations? I'm not sure people are clear on how.
Okay, we really don't have a lot of staff capacity because you're looking at the staff. And actually, I'm also doing the local coastal program. So you're looking at half the staff. That right now, what we're doing is when the first and fifth district supervisors, have done a lot of outreach with Permit Sonoma and have listened a lot to their constituents, and we're going to tackle those areas initially. And that's probably going to keep us busy for the next year. And a lot of this too is see how it goes, see if these are effective, see if these strike the right balance between preserving community character and preserving the local economy. I mean, you've got two sides to the equation there. And there is a point where, there are too many vacation rentals, and there's a point where you're actually shooting yourself in the foot by ruining the local economy. So we have to be cautious, and we've got plenty of areas to look at already, and those are the ones we're going to look at first. We also have another category of areas that may just have such poor access and such incredibly high fire danger that we're going to be looking at those areas and recommendation for emergency services of, should we be allowing vacation rentals in areas that are very remote, very difficult to get to, and that are listed by CAL FIRE as being at very high risk of wildfire. I mean, it's a question we have to answer. There's been no conclusions made, but that's analysis that we will do.
But that won't be done over the next 3 or 4 months.
Absolutely not. It won't.
Yeah.
It probably won't be done in 2023.
Okay, great.
Well, it depends. If we have a big wildfire season, we may be directed to shift gears. I hope we don't. I honestly hope that we don't have to do that analysis on an emergency basis.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I would suggest that maybe Sonoma County Hospitality might want to schedule a call for vacation with Permit Sonoma and vacation rental owners, managers, people on this call in Districts 1 and District 5, so that you can really hear the concerns and feedback from the owners specific, because the issues are different in each of those districts.
Oh yeah, we're acutely aware of the differences.
So we will follow up on with you on that. And I know we have let's see, Carmen, and I'm not sure who driving ATM is, but Carmen, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Gary. Very quickly about the coastal zone. I'm in Bodega Bay. Everything you've said does apply in the coastal zone, ? Are there any additions, and what's the timing for the local coastal plan and getting all of it to the coastal commission? Thank you.
Okay, the vacation rental program in the coastal zone is on a separate track from the LCP. But that said, all the changes in the coastal zone have an additional step, as they still have to be certified by the coastal commission. So deploying the program in the coast is likely not going to happen probably until the fall. If then, it takes a while to get on the commission's agenda. So things will be delayed on the coast. Eventually, the hope is eventually there'll be one uniform set of performance standards that applies countywide. That's our goal. But we do have to get it through the coastal commission first.
Thank you, Gary. Did you have another question, Carmen? No, and then driving ATM, if you want to unmute yourself. If driving ATM is listening and you can unmute yourself, please ask your question. Otherwise, okay, driving ATM.
This is Charles. Hi, Liza. I have a recommendation. Instead of banning vacation rentals in hazardous zones like fire or flood, have the guests make them evacuate at evacuation warning levels. That way they are already gone. Another still question I have is about the 5 and 10% cap that's being talked about in the unincorporated areas. It kind of sounds like until those areas, a specific cap is decided upon, that you might put another type of moratorium until there a decision is made, until that community has made that decision. So I was just wanting more clarification about that. And also what you thought about, instead of banning and burn zones and flood zones, simply have the guests be required to leave at evacuation warning. Thank you, Gary.
Okay, well, we require that already. The license requires that everywhere, not just in high fire areas, the evacuation at the warning level. I mean, if you don't, but that's, you know, if you don't get them out and it becomes mandatory, that's going to be between you, the sheriff, and probably a court. So you really want to deal with that.
I think what Charles is getting at is that if people are already going to be told to leave at the warning stage, then is an outright, the rationale on an outright ban in certain areas of the county. I mean, I think we probably don't have a lot of time to discuss that, but it sounds like there's going to be more work done on that, and that you will be able to.
Yeah, we don't have the information to make that decision yet, and it's probably going to be driven mostly by the fire marshal and not really by the planning department. So yeah, I can't really speculate on where that's going to go. I brought that up just as that's a discussion that's occurring, but it's not going to be part of this initial rollout of the program.
So Nate, I have a question for you. There are a number of comments and questions that we haven't been able to get to. Are we able to capture the meeting chat?
Of course, I'll be capturing the meeting chat and the video recording.
Okay, so we will be posting the video recording on the Sonoma County Hospitality website. We will let you know, Gary, if you can let us know, we would be happy to distribute the draft business license program when you have it ready to go and approved by legal, that you can distribute that, so we can send an email out to everyone who registered for this call with a link to that. And we will also, Gary, perhaps get to you on some of the questions that we couldn't answer today that came in on the chat after we started allowing people to comment, raising their hands. So we thank you, Gary, very much for taking the time today, and Tyra and Tennis, who's not on the call anymore. I do want to let you know that and thank you everyone who participated. I think this has been, we'll be looking for your feedback in terms of not only this session, but are there other sessions that we could host for vacation rental, the vacation rental industry, for example, and inviting Airbnb on? Are there issues that have to do with, you know, business related, you know, insurance, homeowner insurance, or best practices among vacation rental owners and managers? So we'll be asking for your input and your suggestions in terms of how we could leverage this today and host additional sessions that might be of value to vacation rental owners, hosts, and managers. But I really want to thank all of you for participating, and you'll be getting an email from us sometime within the next 10 days, if not sooner.
And Liza, I'd like to say we certainly would love to support you in any discussions you have with Airbnb with regard to you know, not penalizing hosts for meeting their legal requirements.
Yeah, it's you know, Airbnb is an 800-pound gorilla, and sometimes it's hard to get them to focus on some of the unique issues in a particular geography. But I know it's a very important issue because if there's a host, when they have a super host rating, it allows them to stand out, and to have them lose that just because of an emergency and wanting to do the right thing for the guest is not something that obviously we want to, we just need to make sure that Airbnb understands and has a process for that not to happen, for the owners to be penalized. Donna, it sounds like you might have one last question, but I think we are going to wrap up, or have to wrap up. And do you have a quick question, Donna?
I have a quick question. I hope the answer is equally quick. And I've mentioned it in the chat, the text of the new updated rules for the coast. When will they be available to read? When will it go to the Board of Supervisors regarding the Coastal Commission, as well as moving forward with the LCP?
Okay, it's not going with the LCP. Just wanted to clarify that, because we don't want to wait that long.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
We don't want to wait that long, so it's on a separate track from the local coastal plan. There's no changes that have not already been approved by the board. I mean, you can go on MuniCode and look at the change already that's in the coastal zoning ordinance. The thing is, we can't enforce any of this, and we cannot enact the license until in the coastal zone, until the Coastal Commission has found it consistent with the Coastal Act. So we're not changing anything. I think that's my big point here. And the language is identical between the coast and inland in terms of the zoning code.
Donna, you're on mute.
There you are. Okay, great. Thanks for that. And earlier in the year, or towards the end of the last year, we were talking about BIA being applied to the small individual owners, less than whatever the parameter is, what, 600?
I can answer that question. That's not that doesn't have anything to do with Permit Sonoma. So that proposal was withdrawn, and Sonoma County Tourism is going to be putting together. I think they're going to be putting together a committee potentially on advisors from the vacation rental industry. I will ask them and for an update on that. And when we send out our follow-up email, we can provide an update on that too, on that email.
And lastly, to the association, for those folks who are not members of the Sonoma, to this, forgive me, I can't recall your acronym.
Sonoma County Hospitality Association.
Will the video be accessible to non-members?
Excuse me, what?
Will the video be accessible to non-members?
Yes, we will put it on our website. The website is accessible to everyone. We will probably be coming out again, asking for what more we can do for the vacation rental industry as our association, other sessions like this. And certainly we'll probably come out and with an ask to ask vacation rental owners to join others who have joined the Hospitality Association. But I want to thank everyone for their participation and time, and Permit Sonoma for willing to participate in this meeting. We hope that there will be more and that we can keep this dialogue going on. It's so important, Gary, to all of us that are either owners or managers. We are just, passionate about the value that we bring, and we want to make sure that we have a productive relationship on these issues and with Permit Sonoma.
Just send us a request. We're always ready to meet.
Okay, well, we will. You'll be hearing from us soon.
Okay.
Okay, and also I want to take a moment to thank Safari West and Nate Woodward. That Safari West is hosting is sort of the technology behind this call, and Nate has been working on this to make sure we had a successful Zoom, which we all know Zooms can go in the wrong direction sometimes.
They sure
So
can.
thank you, Nate. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to help. Just want to mention, we are recording this session. We are saving a copy of the chat. I'm going to stay on for just a couple minutes. Our presenters are all going to log off. But if you want to just take a moment to type out any questions you didn't get to ask in the chat, I will be saving that chat and forwarding that to our presenters. So please, if you need time to do that, I'll stay on for just a couple minutes here. But thank you so much, Liza. Thank you so much, Gary. I think this has been really informative for everybody, and it was a pleasure to help out.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Stay dry.